Hey guys, tonight we wander together into the long gas-lit nights of Victorian London, where the fog creeps like a living thing and the clocks never stop ticking. You're bundled in a wool coat, not for warmth, because you're indoors, but to muffle the noise. Because in this version of London, sleep is elusive. It hides in the alleyways between the factories and the flickering lamplight, just out of reach. You walk down a cobbled street still glistening from a recent rain, the kind that seeps into your boots and stays there like a grudge. The air smells of soot, coal smoke, and a hint of horse manure, a true Victorian perfume. Lanterns hang from crooked posts, casting shadows that move more than they should. Behind shuttered windows, Londoners toss and turn, searching for rest in a world that never truly powers down. This was the age before quiet. The factories hummed even after sundown, gas lamps hissed like discontented cats, and the clatter of hooves and wheels echoed through every quarter of the city. Sleep didn't stand a chance. You probably won't survive this bedtime tale without losing a little faith in pillows. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're all listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step into the city as it enters the twilight hours. It's 1851. The Great Exhibition is in full swing, and while Queen Victoria is marveling at steam engines and crystal palaces, her subjects are wide awake, rubbing their temples, pacing their rooms, and wondering if that new sleep cordial will actually work this time. Some call it the age of progress. But if you ask anyone past midnight in Camden or Clerkenwell, they'll tell you it's the age of too much noise. Historians still argue whether urban noise pollution was consciously recognized as a public health concern during the Victorian era, or whether people just chalked it up to life in the big city. What we do know, London was loud, even at night. And it got worse as industrialization barreled forward. Iron horses screamed through train tunnels, chimneys belched steam into the moonlight, and factory whistles howled like banshees at shift changes, no matter the hour. You pass a narrow alley and peek inside. Someone is snoring. Not peacefully, mind you. It's more of a wheeze wrapped in a growl. A man is slumped against a wall, half asleep, bottle in hand. He found his cure the old-fashioned way, fermentation. But most Londoners weren't so lucky. Insomnia in the 19th century was treated as both a personal failure and a medical condition. Doctors debated whether it came from poor digestion, overexcited nerves, or simply too much reading by gaslight. No joke. There were actual warnings about consuming novels before bed. Dickens may be delightful, one 1853 pamphlet warned, but his tales do stir the mind too greatly for peaceful rest. As you move past the iron gate of a boarding school, the low murmur of restless students leaks through the stone walls. Victorian educators believed that strict discipline ensured good sleep, but also insisted that children sleep in drafty, barely heated dorms with stiff straw mattresses. It's the kind of logic only a man with sideburns and zero childcare experience could dream up. A lamplighter trudges past you, extending a long pole with a flickering flame at its tip. He taps each glass bulb, like he's waking up tiny ghosts inside them. This gaslight, a miracle of its time, was also an insomniac's nightmare. Constant illumination disrupted circadian rhythms, even though that term wouldn't be coined for another 100 years. People didn't know why they couldn't sleep. They just knew they were tired and cranky, and the city never got dark enough to dream properly. And yes, gaslight was real gas, as in coal gas, as in flammable, as in if your bedroom lamp cracked, you could either wake up coughing or not wake up at all. Sleep well, citizen. By the 1850s, certain neighborhoods had their own distinct sleep cultures. In Soho, musicians practiced late into the night, fiddles echoing through the bricks. In Whitechapel, sleep was a luxury reserved for those who could afford locks and silence. And in Bloomsbury, that's where the thinkers lived, up too late reading philosophy and writing strange letters to the Times about the plague of sleeplessness afflicting the moral gentleman. You find a small bench near the Thames and sit for a moment, watching the brown water ripple under the moonlight. It's quiet here, or at least quieter. The sound of water slapping the dock is oddly soothing, a rare moment of peace. A rat scurries by your foot. Ah, there it is. Despite the chaos, Victorian London did produce its share of sleep philosophers. Yes, that was a thing. One prominent figure, Dr. George Beard, coined the term neurasthenia to describe modern fatigue. He believed electricity, newspapers, and the telegraph were all contributing to a strange new exhaustion of the nerves. Basically, if you felt tired but couldn't sleep, you were probably a victim of modernity. Sound familiar? One fringe theory of the time claimed that London's own magnetic field had been altered by all the new machinery, and that sensitive individuals were being repelled by the etheric disturbance of steam engines and electric trams. No word on what crystals they used to fix it. And yet, even amidst the smog and sleeplessness, there were small comforts. A hot water bottle tucked under the feet, a cup of boiled milk with nutmeg, the rare silence of an early Sunday morning before the city's gears began turning again. For some, sleep was found not in tonics or science, but in routine, darkness, and a bit of distance from Big Ben's relentless ticking. You rise from the bench, feet sore, breath fogging slightly in the cool night air. The city stretches before you, alive and restless, and you're just getting started. You take a right turn off the main thoroughfare and duck into a quieter side street, quieter being relative, of course. Somewhere, a dog is barking at a chimney. A child is crying from an open window. But at least here, the clanging of horse-drawn omnibuses feels a bit farther away. You're in a residential neighborhood now, where the gaslights don't reach all the corners and shadows crowd in like curious cats. You stop outside a modest brick house, its door slightly ajar. The flicker of lamplight draws you in. Inside, a middle-class family has gathered in the kitchen, not for a meal, but for their evening ritual. On the shelf above the hearth sits a green glass bottle with a curling paper label. Its name is printed in a proud Victorian font. Batley's Sedative Solution. You squint at the fine print. The ingredients? Laudanum. 1 part opium, 1 part alcohol. And no, you didn't misread that. You're staring at one of the most common over-the-counter sleep remedies of the 19th century, sitting comfortably between the salt and the flour. The mother uncorks the bottle and pours a careful dose into a tarnished spoon. It's for her son, no older than 5. He's been crying off and on since dusk, and no one in the household has slept more than 3 hours. The boy whimpers, swallows, and slumps back into his little bed beside the stove. This is how Victorian families managed insomnia, not just for themselves, but for their children. Laudanum was a staple in most medicine chests, used to treat teething, nightmares, colic, and yes, inconvenient wakefulness. Historians still argue whether families truly understood the dangers of such substances, or whether they chose to look the other way. It was legal, cheap, and widely available. What else could they do? The father pours a separate dose for himself. He's a bank clerk by day, but tonight his hands shake from hours of ledger work and a dinner of boiled cabbage. He swigs the mixture like it's a fine brandy. For a brief moment, you can almost see his eyelids relax. Laudanum was addictive, of course, but it didn't carry the social stigma we now associate with opioids. In fact, it was fashionable. You've probably heard of writers like Samuel Taylor Coleridge and Thomas de Quincey, whose nighttime visions were laudanum-fueled hallucinations. What you might not know is that plenty of regular people, maids, chimney sweeps, housewives, took it nightly, not to write poetry, but simply to sleep. The chemist shops sold dozens of variations under names like Godfrey's Cordial, Mother Bailey's Quieting Syrup, and the ever-popular Infant's Preservative. If it sounded soothing, it probably contained opium. If it was labeled for all ailments, it might also contain alcohol, morphine, or ammonia. And if it worked, well, no one asked too many questions. You drift past a row of curtained parlors and see the same scene play out again and again. Exhausted Londoners reaching for little bottles, seeking solace in syrup. There's something almost religious about the ritual, the careful measuring, the glass clinking, the soft sigh of surrender. In a wealthier home, you glimpse a different method. A servant mixes warmed milk with a dash of nutmeg and honey, an old-fashioned sedative that predates even Shakespeare. The lady of the house lounges in a brocade dressing gown, feet soaking in lavender water, waiting for sleep to descend. She's read about laudanum in the Ladies' Companion magazine, but prefers natural cures, like sea air, and ignoring her own servant's insomnia. Still, she keeps a bottle tucked in her drawer, just in case. You move on, shoes clicking softly against the stone, and catch a glimpse of a flickering sign up ahead. It reads, Allsop's Fine Remedies and Filters. You've found a Victorian chemist shop. Inside, the smell hits you first. Clove oil, camphor, liniment, a ghost of ammonia. Jars of vibrant powders line the shelves like apothecary peacocks. Behind the counter, a sleepy-eyed pharmacist arranges his wares with the precision of a magician. He offers you a sample of chloral hydrate mixed with peppermint. For delicate nerves, he murmurs. Popular with the traveling class. You politely decline, watching as another customer, pale and twitching, purchases something called the Nightingale Draft. No one asks what's in it. The name is enough. A quirky tidbit you might enjoy. Some 19th century sleep tonics proudly advertised themselves as safe for ladies, children, and horses. One popular concoction, Dalby's carminative, was so widely used that even Queen Victoria was rumored to keep a vial by her bedside, though historians still argue whether that's fact or florid marketing. You notice a scrap of newsprint tucked into the window frame. It's an ad. For wakeful minds and restless hearts, try Dr. Merrick's sleep powder. Rest assured, or your money back. By the 1870s, medical journals began raising alarms about widespread opiate dependency, but public opinion was slow to shift. After all, laudanum helped you sleep, and sleep was precious. No one wanted to go back to tossing and turning under scratchy wool blankets, listening to the coughing of the neighbor next door and the yowling of stray cats in the alley. And so, London slept. A little more quietly, a little more chemically. You exit the shop and return to the street, your head spinning slightly from all the scents and secrets you've inhaled. Overhead, the stars are barely visible through the fog. But one thing is clear. In this city, sleep isn't something you stumble into. It's something you chase, bottle by bottle, until you catch it, or forget why you were chasing it all. You pass a crumpled wrapper on the ground, once the label of a sleep lozenge. The wind catches it and carries it off like a ghost. Your feet guide you along a narrow cobblestone street, not quite ready for rest. Something tugs at your attention, a low, rhythmic chime that pulses through the damp London air like a heartbeat. 1, 2, 3, 4. You stop and count along with it, involuntarily. 8 chimes. Then silence. You look up toward Westminster, where the newly christened Big Ben, the great bell of the Palace of Westminster's clock tower, just marked another hour lost to the city. It's hard to imagine now, but that iconic sound was once a menace to anyone in search of sleep. Installed in 1859, Big Ben was a marvel of engineering. But to insomniacs, it was a very large, very punctual bully. You sit on a nearby bench, pretending not to notice the horse-drawn cab rattling by, the drunk man singing softly to himself, or the never-ending hiss of the gas lamps. Your eyes close for just a second, and the bell rings again. 9 chimes. This thing never shuts up. Back in the 1800s, noise wasn't just background. It was a symptom of progress. Factory whistles blared at all hours, clock towers tolled obsessively, and bells were used for everything from shift changes to fire alerts to simply reminding you that time was marching on, with or without your cooperation. Historians still argue whether the Victorians fully understood the long-term effects of these new urban rhythms on human sleep cycles, or whether they just accepted the exhaustion as the price of empire. You follow the sound of another bell now, this one smaller, sharper. It's the door to a public house being shoved open. The crowd inside roars with laughter and coughs, a familiar Victorian combination. You step inside for warmth and curiosity. Above the bar, a painted sign reads, "Time waits for no one." And neither does the barman, who's pouring pints with one hand and polishing glasses with the other. The clientele is a blur of top hats, aprons, and soot-streaked faces. You overhear a pair of mill workers complaining about the constant tick-tock madness of their factory's clock tower. "It's like sleeping in a drum," one says. His mate nods solemnly, eyes already drooping. In a quieter corner, a man in a threadbare coat mutters about time. "It's alive," he insists, pointing toward the ceiling. "It follows you into dreams and drags you back out again." You edge away from him, slowly. Back on the street, you begin to notice just how many clocks are watching you. Above shop fronts, in church towers, even on the sides of trains. Time became the central obsession of Victorian life. When to work, when to eat, when to rest. But in reality, the clock ruled all. And the tolling of bells didn't just mark the hours, it made you aware of them, especially the ones when you should have been asleep. And as industrial scheduling became more precise, human sleep got more fractured. People who used to rise and rest with the sun now had to adhere to exact start times, night shifts, and rotating schedules. A blacksmith in Wapping might begin his workday at 3 a.m., while a dock worker in Limehouse might not finish until midnight. There was no single bedtime anymore, only deadlines. Some tried to adapt. You pass a street vendor selling small tin mufflers, ear trumpets turned sleep aids. "Blocks the bells," he croaks, "or your penny's back." You suspect they block little more than hope. A quirkier invention? A man once tried to market a clock curtain, a heavy drape stuffed with horsehair designed to muffle the sound of nearby tower bells. It was largely ineffective and deeply flammable. You duck down a quieter lane, one lined with tenements. Inside each small flat, you imagine the nightly battle between the mind and the hour. A mother clutching a pillow over her ears. A pensioner with cotton stuffed in his nose and mouth because he read somewhere it helps dampen the chimes. A child learning to count not sheep, but bells. Victorian literature, too, became steeped in the presence of clocks. Charles Dickens wrote often of sleepless nights broken by the sound of distant tolling, calling it a relentless reminder that rest is borrowed time. He was, to put it gently, not a fan. As you pass a rag-and-bone man wheeling a cart, his goods jangling with metallic clangs, you wonder, could anyone truly sleep through this symphony of ticking and tolling and rumbling and bells? Maybe that's why some turn to more extreme measures. There are whispered stories, never printed in newspapers, of course, about people who sabotaged local bells. One man in Lambeth was allegedly caught trying to stuff his town's clock tower bell with hay, claiming it was possessed by Satan's metronome. Another tried bribing a bell ringer to skip the midnight chime. "Just the midnight," he said. "I beg you, man." It didn't work. You climb a set of stone steps to a high terrace overlooking the city. From here, you can see the great gears of London still turning, omnibuses crossing bridges, chimneys pulsing smoke, silhouettes flitting across windows. It's beautiful, in a deeply exhausting way. The tower clocks toll again. 10 chimes. You exhale through your nose. Of course. Time, in the Victorian mind, was both master and menace. It gave order, yes, but it also whispered constantly of mortality. Every tick reminded you of what you hadn't done. Every toll reminded you of what you hadn't become. Not exactly the lullaby you were hoping for, and yet, in some strange way, it was comforting, predictable, eternal. The bells would toll no matter what, whether you slept or not, whether you rose joyous or bone-weary. Big Ben didn't care. He just chimed. And so, you accept it. Another hour. Another reminder. The city doesn't stop. And neither, just yet, do you. You descend from the terrace, your boots clicking softly against wet stone steps. The night is older now, folded deeper into itself. A few shutters creak in the wind. A soot-smudged cat darts across the road, vanishing under a carriage. Somewhere nearby, a baby coughs, dry, shallow, rhythmic. The sign ahead reads, Dunstan and Wicks, dispensers of tonics and teeth powder, its gold lettering half-flaked and humming faintly under a flickering gas lamp. You step inside the apothecary. The bell above the door jangles with polite disapproval. The air smells of licorice, vinegar, and ambition. Behind the counter stands a thin man with a spectacular mustache. He doesn't look up from grinding something pale and powdery with a mortar and pestle. "Looking for sleep, are we?" he says, as if you've just admitted to theft or adultery. Without waiting for your answer, he gestures toward a glass-fronted cabinet. Inside sit rows of brown bottles and blue tins, each one bearing names that promise dreams in cursive script. Dr. Collis Brown's chlorodyne, McMunn's elixir of opium, Dr. J. Ballard's night drops. All perfectly legal, all medically suspect. You pick up a bottle of chlorodyne. It clinks cold in your hand. The label boasts it's good for insomnia, nerves, diarrhea, toothache, female complaints, and the general dread of existence, though that last bit is implied. The main ingredients: chloroform, cannabis, and morphine. The holy trinity of Victorian unbotheredness. You ask the apothecary how popular it is. He raises a brow. "I go through more of that than tooth powder," which, in Victorian London, is saying something. Chlorodyne was invented by Dr. J. Collis Brown in the mid-1800s, originally as a treatment for cholera. But it found its true calling as a sedative for the sleepless, rich or poor. Its taste was medicinally unpleasant, and its dosage instructions ranged from vague to lethal. Still, it was adored. It numbed the mind, dulled the heart, and gave you the kind of sleep that bordered on unconsciousness. Historians still argue whether most users truly understood what they were consuming, or whether they simply trusted anything with the word doctor on the bottle. And to be fair, the Victorians had a complicated relationship with doctors. Many were reputable, some were quacks, and a few were outright dealers with diplomas. The apothecary offers you a whiff of a lesser-known concoction called Bailey's Sleep Comforter, a mixture of poppy syrup and essence of aniseed. "It's for those who fear the heavy stuff," he says, giving a meaningful nod toward the chlorodyne. "Though between you and me, it tastes like furniture polish." You set the bottle down gently and browse the shelves instead. One label catches your eye: Cannabis Indica Tincture. Yes, that's cannabis, as in actual Victorian weed. The tincture was prescribed for insomnia, migraines, melancholy, and especially female hysteria, a catch-all diagnosis for any woman expressing an emotion stronger than mild contentment. The dosage: 10 to 20 drops on sugar before bedtime. You can't help but smile. No wonder some of them painted such elaborate watercolors. Of course, there were risks. An 1874 medical journal noted, in what must have been the understatement of the century, that overuse of chlorodyne may lead to symptoms of dependency. By 1880, cases of overdose were well documented. Some addicts drank it by the teacup. Others mixed it with brandy. One famously insomniac poet insisted on soaking a sponge in it and breathing through the sponge like a Victorian vape pen. But still, they slept. The apothecary tells you a curious tale about a local undertaker who used to recommend chlorodyne to his more delicate customers. "Better sleep than grief," he'd say, handing out samples at funerals. According to rumor, he once took a dose so large he woke up a full day later, convinced it was the next century. He retired soon after and took up bird watching. You nod politely, trying not to picture the man identifying sparrows in a narcotic haze. Outside, the fog has thickened. Your breath comes out in little clouds. You glance up the street and spot a man weaving on his feet. He leans against a lamppost, muttering to himself, then sits down, right there on the curb, and begins snoring audibly. You recognize the half-spilled bottle in his coat pocket. Chlorodyne, the city's unofficial lullaby. Back inside the shop, the apothecary shows you his quietest cellar, a tiny velvet pouch labeled "The Gentleman's Night Remedy." Inside are 5 small tablets. He won't say what's in them. "Old recipe," he shrugs. "But they work." He says this like a man who's watched others float away on those pills, some softly, some a little too far. It strikes you then just how desperate the Victorians were to switch off. Between the bells, the clocks, the coal smoke, the worries of empire and economy, sleep was rebellion. And bottles like these were weapons in the fight against being awake too long. One fringe theory of the day held that sleep came not from rest, but from the temporary retreat of the soul. Narcotics, in that view, were less about knocking you out and more about summoning the soul back sooner. You'd think more souls would leave forwarding addresses. As you leave the apothecary, the bell chimes behind you, and you step into the mist once more. A distant clock tolls. Midnight, again. The same hour that rang just 10 minutes ago. Time folds strangely here. The street is empty now, save for the sleeping man by the lamp. He shifts slightly, murmurs, and continues snoring. You're not sure if he's dreaming or just paused. Either way, he's resting. And that, in Victorian London, is a small miracle. You walk on, drawn by the warm orange glow behind tall curtains. Another house, but this one feels different. Quieter, tidier, more deliberate. You push open the polished iron gate and approach the front door. There's a hush here that feels rehearsed. Inside, you find yourself in the home of a well-to-do Victorian lady. Everything smells faintly of rose water and starch. A silver brush rests on a vanity, beside a blue glass atomizer and a copy of the Ladies' Monthly Museum. She is upstairs now, preparing for bed with the practiced grace of someone who has read 4 different pamphlets on the ideal pre-sleep routine. Let's be honest, she's got options. You watch as she sips warm milk from fine china, infused, of course, with valerian root and a touch of orange blossom. A housemaid quietly adjusts the blackout curtains, imported from France, heavy velvet. So heavy, in fact, they probably block sunlight and gossip. She reclines in a high-backed chaise near the fireplace, eyes closed, listening to the soft hum of a peculiar little machine on the nightstand. It purrs softly, like a kitten with secrets. This, you realize, is one of those fashionable air ionizers, or so the inventor claims. It runs on a clumsy battery and smells faintly of burning wires and lavender. By now, you're probably thinking, surely this woman sleeps well, all the comforts, all the rituals, but you'd be wrong. Victorian luxury didn't guarantee rest. It simply gave you new things to worry about while awake. The upper classes of London, despite their down pillows and custom chemists, suffered from sleeplessness just as badly as the laborers in the East End. Their insomnia was wrapped in silk, yes, but it was still very much insomnia. Historians still argue whether the Victorian obsession with sleep hygiene in the upper classes reflected genuine health concern or simply another performative act of gentility. After all, nothing says I'm refined like spending 2 hours preparing to pass out. Tonight, she's trying a new product from Harrods, a sleep bonnet woven with silver thread, meant to cool the scalp and quiet the mind. It looks like something you'd wear if you were both nervous and preparing to duel at dawn. The advertisement claimed it was perfect for melancholic ladies, poets, and those recovering from travel to the continent. She adjusts it solemnly, as though about to receive communion. Elsewhere in the room, the maid lights a scented candle, lavender and neroli. You squint at the label, Queen Victoria's favorite blend. Whether that's true or just good marketing is unclear, but it smells expensive. Still, the woman does not sleep. Not yet. Instead, she opens a small cabinet built discreetly into the wall. Inside are rows of small vials and tins. You see familiar names: Godfrey's cordial, Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, but also a less familiar one, Dr. Ashcroft's electro-celestial nerve salt. The packaging features a bearded man floating slightly above the earth, surrounded by lightning bolts. You assume he must be Dr. Ashcroft, and he seems very sure of himself. She pours a bit into a glass of lemon water and sips, then lies back against her hand-embroidered pillow with a sigh. She's trying everything, all of it, because while her parlor may be peaceful, her mind is busy cataloging debts, social blunders, Aunt Josephine's cough, the latest scandal in the Gazette, and whether or not her new boots make her look provincial. Even luxury cannot mute the mind. A quirky tidbit for you. Victorian women's magazines regularly featured bedtime movement routines to prepare the body for sleep. Gentle stretches, calming walks, or standing in front of a mirror, repeating affirmations like, "I shall rest for the Queen and Empire." No one really knows if they worked, but they were elegant ways to pass the time between failure and surrender. You drift from room to room in this home, passing plush armchairs and tea trays and delicate gas lamps with silk shades. Even the light feels choreographed. Upstairs, a guest bedroom features an adjustable mattress, a rare contraption of springs and brass cranks designed to tilt the sleeper into the optimal horizontal repose. It looks like something you'd use to launch a gentleman into orbit, or perhaps just gently encourage him to nap. Still, the guests complain of dreams too vivid, rooms too warm, or air too still. One woman requested fresh violets on her pillow nightly. Another could only sleep with the window cracked precisely 2 fingers' width. A third insisted on having her maid read aloud the shipping schedules from the Times, claiming the rhythmic listings lulled her to sleep. You smile. You understand. Because, let's be honest, you've had your own rituals, haven't you? That weird herbal tea. That one podcast. Rearranging your pillow 5 different ways before finally giving up and scrolling the news again. Insomnia makes scientists of us all. Victorian high society began to normalize this collective sleeplessness in strange ways. An entire genre of fiction emerged, sleepless tales, written specifically for those too refined to slumber. They featured melancholic heroines, moonlit gardens, mysterious footsteps, and often ended with no resolution at all, which, ironically, is quite relaxing. You peer out the window now. The fog outside is denser. The city feels quieter somehow, perhaps because it's late, or perhaps because the woman upstairs has finally, mercifully, drifted off. She looks peaceful, but you know the truth. That sleep came at the end of a long negotiation, with her bed, her fears, her bonnet, her bottle, her electric breeze machine, and probably her cousin's judgmental diary entry. You tiptoe out. Luxury, after all, was never a cure, just a softer cushion for the fall. You return to the street, where the fog has thickened to a kind of damp embrace. It wraps around your shoulders and settles into your collar, as if even the air has grown sleepy. You pull your coat tighter and follow the glow of a solitary gas lamp toward a narrow sign, half obscured by ivy and soot. Dr. Theodore Wellings, somnolence specialist. The building it's attached to is narrow, more vertical than wide, and painted a weary shade of beige. You climb a set of creaky stairs and find yourself in a waiting room with thick carpet, overstuffed chairs, and the faint smell of menthol and burnt toast. A heavy door creaks open. "Next," says a deep voice. You shuffle into a dim office filled with books, oil paintings of owls, and, curiously, a full-length mirror angled toward the settee. Dr. Wellings stands by it, bearded and wild-eyed, wearing a suit that looks like it's been slept in and possibly argued with. "Trouble sleeping, yes?" he says, barely waiting for your nod. "Let's try the gentleman's cure." You lie down on the stiff leather couch, hands folded neatly, unsure of what to expect. The doctor sits beside you, holding what appears to be a brass pendulum. It glints faintly in the gaslight as he swings it gently back and forth. "You are growing tired," he intones. "Heavy, like a boiled pudding." You almost giggle, which would be wildly inappropriate, so you bite your tongue. Yes, you're undergoing Victorian hypnosis. Hypnotism, or mesmerism, as it was first called, was all the rage by the mid-1800s. Once dismissed as carnival trickery, it gained legitimacy thanks to a parade of enthusiastic physicians, philosophers, and people who were just desperate to sleep. The idea was simple. Distract the conscious mind with focused attention, then sneak the body into rest. Like convincing a toddler that bedtime is a game. Dr. Wellings speaks slowly now. His voice is steady, rhythmic, and honestly kind of soothing. "Your arms are like warm eels," he says. Less soothing. You learn quickly that Victorian hypnotism was a mixed bag, half science, half poetry, and a third confusing math. Some doctors swore by it, claiming they could lull patients into hour-long trances that cured everything from insomnia to nail-biting. Others accused them of fraud, claiming hypnotists were just well-dressed con men with melodious voices. Historians still argue whether hypnosis was truly effective or simply a placebo dressed in a waistcoat. But for many Victorians, it was the first time anyone had taken their sleeplessness seriously enough to talk to them for an hour, and that alone helped. Dr. Welling stops swinging the pendulum and peers at you, eyes gleaming. "Let us go deeper," he says. "Let us ask the subconscious what keeps you awake." You're about to explain that the bells, the clocks, the tonics, the fog, the everything keep you awake. But then he pulls out a second device. It's a music box, or perhaps a metronome, but instead of ticking, it produces soft harp notes. They're oddly pleasant, even if one of them sounds like a sneeze. This is what some called the dual method: hypnotic suggestion and auditory lullaby. If the mind won't rest, perhaps the ears can convince it. He guides you through visualization, one of his own invention. You are floating above your own bed, he says. Below you, your worries are tiny Victorian postage stamps, very expensive, very insignificant. He chuckles at his own joke. You have to admit, it's not bad. You begin to relax. A little. Not into sleep exactly, but into that strange pre-sleep state where you forget what year it is and mildly resent gravity. And just when you're sinking in, the doctor whispers, "Now, we confront the insomnia monster." Your eyes snap open. Sorry. The what? Yes. Dr. Wellings is a firm believer in the personification of sleeplessness. He calls it the insomnia specter, and he encourages patients to visualize it and, in his words, negotiate terms. Yours, apparently, looks like a tax auditor with coffee breath. You glare at it from your mental chaise lounge. A quirky tidbit. Some Victorian therapists encouraged patients to write formal letters to their insomnia. "Dear sleeplessness, I understand you are concerned about deadlines. However, I would like to sleep tonight. Yours sincerely." These letters were then burned or buried in the garden. Symbolic closure, presumably, unless you had nosy neighbors. Dr. Wellings finishes your session with a warm cup of herbal tea. You're not sure what's in it, something between peppermint and disappointment, but it's comforting in its own strange way. You thank him. He bows slightly and hands you a business card that reads, "Dr. T. Wellings, sleep is a conversation, not a battle." You step back out into the street, mind still humming with harp notes and ridiculous metaphors. And yet, you feel a little softer at the edges. Not tired exactly, but open to the idea of sleep. Perhaps that's what hypnosis did best. Not force slumber, but invite it. And in a world of ticking clocks and twitching curtains, that invitation was rare enough to be magic. You glance back at the crooked building as the fog swallows it whole. Was any of that real? Did he truly help? Did you just imagine the whole thing? Hard to say. But the night feels quieter now. Or maybe you've just stopped arguing with it. You continue your drift through the sleeping city, though sleeping may be too generous. Tossing, groaning, pretending. London at night is less a slumbering beast and more a sprawling, over-caffeinated cat that occasionally blinks and knocks something over. You follow the scent of herbs now, earthy and sharp, and find yourself outside a weathered townhouse with a brass knocker shaped like an owl mid-hoot. Above the door is a hand-painted sign, Mrs. Pickering's Restorative Teas and Nocturnal Balms, since 1842. You step inside and are instantly swallowed by the aroma of chamomile, sage, and something vaguely like old socks, but probably medicinal. The room is dimly lit by oil lamps, casting amber shadows across wooden shelves stacked with neatly labeled jars. Behind a counter cluttered with dried flowers stands a stout woman in a paisley shawl, her spectacles balanced precariously on the tip of her nose. "Well," she says, hands on hips, "you look like you haven't dreamt in years." You don't deny it. Mrs. Pickering was one of many herbalists operating in Victorian London, part healer, part apothecary, part neighborhood therapist. Though not officially licensed, she held the trust of dozens of sleepless locals, especially those too poor or too skeptical for fancy physicians or hypnotists with velvet sofas. She offers you a tin of drowsy hedgehog blend. Good for nerves, dreams, and indigestion, she explains. And you won't wake up feeling like you've swallowed a small stove. The Victorian herbal tea trade was enormous, much of it marketed under the guise of gentle feminine remedies. But really, everyone drank them. Sleep teas, soothing tisanes, midnight drafts, all promising the kind of deep rest only poets and cats seem to achieve naturally. Mrs. Pickering prepares you a sample in a mismatched teacup. It smells of valerian, hops, and dried pear peel. Sip slowly, she advises. Sleep doesn't like to be rushed. You sit on a creaky stool, feeling vaguely like you're in a scene from a Dickens novel where someone's about to offer you both wisdom and biscuits. As you sip, she begins listing her most popular concoctions. Dreamwalker's Steep, with skullcap and passion flower. Moon milk dust, a blend of oat straw, cinnamon, and a pinch of ground date seed. The Widow's Nap, strong enough to stop nightmares about your third husband. You smile, but she's not joking. A quirky tidbit. Many Victorian herb sellers believed certain blends would not only promote sleep, but guide dreams. Parsley was said to encourage prophetic visions. Lemon balm supposedly protected you from unwholesome phantoms. One particularly eccentric recipe from 1869 claimed that steeping crushed garlic skins in red wine would lead to dreams of your future spouse. Possibly accurate, but not recommended for shared bedrooms. Historians still argue whether these folk remedies had real physiological effects or were simply placebo via teacup. But in truth, the ritual of tea, the brewing, the scent, the warmth, was often as powerful as the plants themselves. You weren't just drinking something to knock you out. You were telling your body, "We're done now. It's over. Let's try again tomorrow." Mrs. Pickering pulls out an old wooden box and opens it reverently. Inside are sachets, little cloth pillows filled with dried herbs, stitched with care. "For your bed," she says. "Tuck it near your pillow. You'll dream softer." The Victorians loved sachets. Lavender for calming, mugwort for lucid dreams, rosemary to banish evil spirits and insistent thoughts. Some people even tied them to their bedposts or wore them around their necks like sleep-themed amulets. You imagine a banker with a lavender pouch in his waistcoat pocket, or a scullery maid tying rosemary to her apron string. Everyone wanted the same thing, one whole night without interruption. On the mantel, you notice a small wooden statue of Morpheus, the Greek god of dreams. His eyes are closed, his wings folded. You ask if she believes in him. Mrs. Pickering snorts. "I believe in warm feet, a heavy blanket, and not reading politics before bed." Valid. You finish your tea. It's oddly calming, not knockout draft strong, but gentle. You feel it tugging at the corners of your thoughts like a lullaby hummed from another room. Mrs. Pickering insists you take a sachet. "No charge," she says. "Just think kind thoughts near it." You leave her shop feeling almost hopeful, which is, for a city of gas fumes and sirens and echoing boots, a rare gift indeed. As you walk, you begin to notice more windows darkened than before. Curtains drawn, lamps dimmed. Maybe the city is finally winding down, or maybe you've just fallen into its slower rhythm. A street preacher snores gently beneath a newspaper. A milk cart creaks by, pulled by a horse who looks half asleep himself. Even Big Ben seems to be holding its breath for a moment. No chime, just silence. The tea sits warm in your belly, the sachet nestled in your pocket like a secret. You feel the urge to lie down somewhere, anywhere, and close your eyes. But there's more night to see, more dreams to borrow, more stories hiding behind darkened doors. And so, you keep moving, gently, slowly, as if not to wake the city. The fog begins to lift, just slightly, as you continue your nocturnal wander, revealing the curve of a canal and the flicker of distant lamps reflecting in black water. The city exhales. You feel it in your ribs. This part of town is quieter, humbler. The streets slope unevenly, and the buildings sag inward, as though resting between struggles. You cross a narrow footbridge where the planks creak with every step, and just beyond, a small wooden sign swings gently in the breeze. St. Agnes Refuge for the rest-deprived and spiritually uneasy. You're curious, naturally, and maybe a bit tired yourself. Inside, the atmosphere is almost chapel-like. The lights are low, the walls are lined with simple bunks, and a faint murmur of prayer hums in the background like wind through tall grass. A nun in soft gray robes moves silently through the room, adjusting blankets and tucking in a corner here or there like she's folding clouds. This is not a hospital, nor a boarding house. It's something in between, a Victorian sleep sanctuary. These were rare, privately funded by philanthropists and religious orders to provide rest, not just shelter. A place where sleep was treated as sacred. The residents are mostly women, a few children, the occasional gray-bearded man snoring faintly in a corner. They've come here not for cures, but for permission. Permission to stop striving, to stop fearing, to simply close their eyes and not be watched, judged, or awakened. You ease into a wooden bench along the wall, taking it in. One woman in a nearby bed clutches a cross and murmurs something in her sleep, perhaps a psalm, or maybe just the remnants of a conversation from long ago. Another sits quietly, wide awake, staring at her hands folded in her lap. You notice a sign above the fireplace. Sleep is a gift from God, not a luxury. Victorian society had a complicated relationship with sleep and morality. The upper classes often romanticized sleeplessness as a sign of genius or industriousness. "He toils while others dream," they'd say. But for the working poor, sleeplessness was just another weight. No romance, just survival. Historians still argue whether these sanctuaries were a sincere gesture of compassion or a veiled attempt at spiritual conformity. But the people who came here didn't care. They were exhausted. If you asked them what they wanted most, it wasn't a sermon. It was a pillow. You watch as a nurse places a warm stone bottle near a child's feet. "To trick the toes into forgetting the cold," she whispers, more to herself than to you. A quirky detail. Many Victorian rest homes believed that dreams could be spiritually cleansing. One pamphlet distributed here at St. Agnes suggested that nightmares were the soul's way of exhaling accumulated sorrow, and therefore to be embraced, not feared. Sleep wasn't just restoration, it was confession. You wander further in, past the bunks, into a side room where a handful of patients are lying not in beds, but in hammocks. A nurse explains that for some, especially those who'd worked on ships or in factories with swinging machinery, the gentle sway of the hammock helped retrain the brain to expect motion. Then rest. You lie in one for a moment. It cradles you awkwardly at first, but then, slowly, your spine aligns, your breathing slows. You can see the logic. It feels like being carried, like someone larger and steadier is keeping watch while you let go. Above your head, a faded mural depicts a robed angel placing a hand gently on the brow of a sleeping child. You imagine her whispering, "You are not alone in this." Sleep wasn't medicalized here. It was honored. One elderly woman, her face a cartography of years, asks if you'd like some blessing water. You nod politely. She dips a finger in a small bowl of rose-infused water and taps your forehead. "Not for dreams," she says, "just for quiet." There's something strangely powerful in that. Outside the sanctuary, a bell chimes once, then again, then stops. You expect the familiar cadence of the full hour, but instead, it's a softer pattern. 3 bells. Pause. 1 bell. A code of sorts. You ask a passing nurse. 3 for rest, she explains. 1 for peace. We ring them for the sleepers, not the timekeepers. For once, the bells are on your side. Before you go, a nun presses a small linen sachet into your hand. Rose, bay leaf, a whisper of clove, she says. Not for magic, just for company. You tuck it into your coat pocket. Back on the street, the night has turned gentle. The gas lamps no longer glare. The fog no longer presses. It feels, for the first time, like London is exhaling with you. You walk a little slower now, not because you're searching, but because you don't feel hunted by the clock anymore. Maybe what the rest-deprived of Victorian London needed most wasn't a stronger sedative or a quieter clock tower. Maybe they just needed a place to lay their burden down. You glance back at the sanctuary, now half hidden in mist. The warm glow from its windows feels like a lullaby sung in a language you didn't know you remembered. And for the first time tonight, you almost forget you're tired. You're back on the main road now, feet brushing against slick cobblestones, breath visible in the night air. The city hasn't grown quieter exactly, it's just humming in a different key. Even the sounds seem to whisper. A distant carriage, the murmur of a late-shift printer press. Somewhere, a dog sighs in its sleep. And then, you spot it. A crowd gathered outside a storefront draped in deep green velvet. The gold lettering reads, "The Nocturne Theater, Oniric Entertainment for the Restless Mind." Curiosity pulls you forward. Inside, the space is dim and smoky, with plush red seating and an odd hush, as though everyone's afraid to disturb the curtain. A program is pressed into your hand. Tonight's feature, The Dream Cabinet, a sleepwalk in 3 acts. A man in a cravat and dramatic eyeliner takes the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," he begins, "what if I told you that sleep is theater, that your dreams are plays, staged nightly for one?" You're not sure whether to laugh or applaud, maybe both. This is sleep as spectacle, the Victorians' more eccentric take on their own restlessness. Not satisfied with potions or prayers, some sought performance, illusions, fantasias. If sleep would not come on its own, perhaps it could be coaxed by art. What follows is a performance unlike any you've seen. Silhouettes cast against a silk screen, shadow puppetry mimicking a man tumbling through cloud-shaped doorways, violinists playing eerie lullabies in minor keys. A woman in white glides across the stage, trailing gauze, whispering lines from Coleridge's Kubla Khan. And somehow, it works. The room is entranced, not asleep, but no longer fully awake either. You feel your own thoughts slow, like syrup in a cold jar. Victorians loved these dream plays, a fringe theatrical form designed not to excite, but to sedate. Unlike most performances of the time, these were gentle, quiet, and deliberately strange. The goal wasn't to entertain, it was to lull. Historians still argue whether this genre arose from genuine artistic ambition or sheer desperation. The truth is likely both. After all, when your brain refuses to rest, even a papier-mâché moon and a fog machine become sacred tools. A quirky tidbit. Some London theaters actually offered nap seats, gently rocking chairs in the back rows, sold at discount prices for patrons who just wanted to drift. Ushers were instructed not to wake snorers unless they disrupted the plot. You smile at the thought of a whole row of dandies and widows slumped in synchrony as Shakespeare drones on in iambic pentameter. The final act of the play features no words at all, just a projection of clouds drifting across the stage, accompanied by a glass harmonica and the soft ticking of metronomes placed under each chair. The effect is hypnotic. You blink slowly. You don't remember when the music started, or when your body relaxed into the velvet seat like warm wax. You glance around. The man next to you is gently snoring. No one minds. As the curtain falls, the announcer returns. "We hope your mind feels a little softer," he says, bowing. We cannot promise sleep, but we can promise the road there feels less lonely. You step outside into cool night air once again. You realize then something important. That for some Victorians, the problem wasn't just not sleeping. It was not dreaming. The lack of visions. The absence of magic. In a world of gray factories and soot, they needed somewhere to go in their minds, even if their bodies never fully slept. Some even documented their imagined dreams, creating dream scrapbooks full of symbols, clipped phrases, drawings of staircases and moons. One eccentric gentleman insisted he dreamed exclusively in haikus, and self-published 3 volumes titled Fog and Furniture, Nocturnal Poems from the East Wing. You chuckle, then yawn. It catches you off guard. Your body, so often stubborn, is starting to surrender, gently, quietly. As you walk, you pass a street lamp where someone has chalked on the brick wall. Sleep is a doorway, dreaming is the key. You have no idea who wrote it, but they were probably one of them. The night poets, the ghostly theater-goers, the folk who saw in their insomnia not just a curse, but an opportunity for something else. You pause beneath the lamp's halo, closing your eyes just for a moment. A line from the play echoes in your mind. Rest is not escape, it is arrival. When you open your eyes again, the fog is thinner, and the shadows look less sharp. The night no longer seems so endless. And if the next hour holds no sleep, well, at least it holds wonder. Maybe they just needed a place to lay their burden down. You glance back at the sanctuary, now half hidden in mist. The warm glow from its windows feels like a lullaby sung in a language you didn't know you remembered. And for the first time tonight, you almost forget you're tired. You're back on the main road now, feet brushing against slick cobblestones, breath visible in the night air. The city hasn't grown quieter exactly, it's just humming in a different key. Even the sounds seem to whisper. A distant carriage, the murmur of a late-shift printer press. Somewhere, a dog sighs in its sleep. And then, you spot it. A crowd gathered outside a storefront draped in deep green velvet. The gold lettering reads, "The Nocturne Theater, Oniric Entertainment for the Restless Mind." Curiosity pulls you forward. Inside, the space is dim and smoky, with plush red seating and an odd hush, as though everyone's afraid to disturb the curtain. A program is pressed into your hand. Tonight's feature, The Dream Cabinet, a sleepwalk in 3 acts. A man in a cravat and dramatic eyeliner takes the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," he begins, "what if I told you that sleep is theater, that your dreams are plays, staged nightly for one?" You're not sure whether to laugh or applaud, maybe both. This is sleep as spectacle, the Victorians' more eccentric take on their own restlessness. Not satisfied with potions or prayers, some sought performance, illusions, fantasias. If sleep would not come on its own, perhaps it could be coaxed by art. What follows is a performance unlike any you've seen. Silhouettes cast against a silk screen, shadow puppetry mimicking a man tumbling through cloud-shaped doorways, violinists playing eerie lullabies in minor keys. A woman in white glides across the stage, trailing gauze, whispering lines from Coleridge's Kubla Khan. And somehow, it works. The room is entranced, not asleep, but no longer fully awake either. You feel your own thoughts slow, like syrup in a cold jar. Victorians loved these dream plays, a fringe theatrical form designed not to excite, but to sedate. Unlike most performances of the time, these were gentle, quiet, and deliberately strange. The goal wasn't to entertain, it was to lull. Historians still argue whether this genre arose from genuine artistic ambition or sheer desperation. The truth is likely both. After all, when your brain refuses to rest, even a papier-mâché moon and a fog machine become sacred tools. A quirky tidbit. Some London theaters actually offered nap seats, gently rocking chairs in the back rows, sold at discount prices for patrons who just wanted to drift. Ushers were instructed not to wake snorers unless they disrupted the plot. You smile at the thought of a whole row of dandies and widows slumped in synchrony as Shakespeare drones on in iambic pentameter. The final act of the play features no words at all, just a projection of clouds drifting across the stage, accompanied by a glass harmonica and the soft ticking of metronomes placed under each chair. The effect is hypnotic. You blink slowly. You don't remember when the music started, or when your body relaxed into the velvet seat like warm wax. You glance around. The man next to you is gently snoring. No one minds. As the curtain falls, the announcer returns. "We hope your mind feels a little softer," he says, bowing. "We cannot promise sleep, but we can promise the road there feels less lonely." You step outside into cool night air once again. You realize then something important. That for some Victorians, the problem wasn't just not sleeping. It was not dreaming. The lack of visions. The absence of magic. In a world of gray factories and soot, they needed somewhere to go in their minds, even if their bodies never fully slept. Some even documented their imagined dreams, creating dream scrapbooks full of symbols, clipped phrases, drawings of staircases and moons. One eccentric gentleman insisted he dreamed exclusively in haikus, and self-published 3 volumes titled Fog and Furniture, Nocturnal Poems from the East Wing. You chuckle, then yawn. It catches you off guard. Your body, so often stubborn, is starting to surrender, gently, quietly. As you walk, you pass a street lamp where someone has chalked on the brick wall, "Sleep is a doorway, dreaming is the key." You have no idea who wrote it, but they were probably one of them. The night poets, the ghostly theater-goers, the folk who saw in their insomnia not just a curse, but an opportunity for something else. You pause beneath the lamp's halo, closing your eyes just for a moment. A line from the play echoes in your mind. Rest is not escape, it is arrival. When you open your eyes again, the fog is thinner, and the shadows look less sharp. The night no longer seems so endless. And if the next hour holds no sleep, well, at least it holds wonder. The city has thinned now, not in population, but in pressure. The weight that clung to your shoulders when the night began has softened, like a coat drying near a fire. Your pace slows. You pass a row of shuttered shop fronts, hats, pies, gas mantles, and round a quiet corner into a neighborhood you haven't seen before. There's no sign, no number, just a narrow doorway left ajar. You push it open and step into what can only be described as a bedroom museum. The air is thick with dust and lavender. Lining the walls are bed frames, some ornate, some laughably minimal. Over here, a canopy bed with crimson drapes. Over there, a sailor's bunk tucked beneath a shelf of thick nautical logs. It's not just furniture. It's the history of how people tried to sleep. An elderly curator in a shawl greets you without surprise. "Trouble drifting off?" she says, as if it's the most common confession in the world. And in this city, maybe it is. She guides you slowly through the displays. "This one," she says, patting a modest oak frame, "was used by chimney sweeps in East Ham. They'd come home with soot still in their eyelashes and lie on sacks filled with straw and old wool coats. The trick was to sleep fast. They'd be up again in 4 hours." Victorians, especially the working poor, had to make do. Beds were shared, rotated, or improvised entirely. A carpenter might sleep in his workshop, a widow in her pantry. Children curled beneath stairs, curled into one another like parentheses. You nod slowly, absorbing the humbleness of it all. Next is a boarding house bunk, wide enough for 2 strangers, sometimes 3. You peer at a faded placard. For rent by the half night, cheaper if shared. No privacy, no luxury, just horizontal space. Historians still argue whether the rise of sleep deprivation in Victorian London came from industrial overwork or sheer architectural limitation. Likely both. Space was at a premium. And time? Even more so. You move to a larger display, the gentleman's rest chamber, circa 1885. A tall headboard carved with ivy, polished until you can see yourself yawning in it. The mattress stuffed with horsehair. The quilt, a patchwork of family tartans and respectable colors. Apparently, this bed belonged to a solicitor with chronic night sweats who believed sleeping facing west aligned the spine with Mercury's orbit. A quirky tidbit. Many Victorians arranged their beds according to magnetic direction, believing north-south alignment promoted circulation, while east-west disrupted dreams. Several pamphlets warned that sleeping with your feet facing the door risked inviting the final journey. Cheery. In a corner of the room is a rickety folding cot, labeled factory floor model. It's little more than canvas stretched across metal poles. Used by managers who wouldn't leave the premises, the curator says. Sleep was something they borrowed, not owned. You think of your own life for a moment. The missed hours, the bargaining with alarms, the half-sleeps, the over-caffeinated mornings. You've done your own factory floor nights, only yours had smartphones and anxiety playlists. You step next into a dim alcove lined with shadow boxes. Each contains a sleep charm, small tokens people once tucked under pillows or hung from bedposts. There's a pressed flower wrapped in lace, a stone with a circle etched into it, a carved figurine of a lion no bigger than a matchbox. Protection, the curator whispers, not from monsters, from wakefulness. She offers you a small card. Create your own charm. What's the shape of your rest? You think for a moment, then draw a spiral. No explanation. It just feels right. You tuck the card into your pocket and thank her. She nods once, gently, like a librarian giving you permission to take a very important book home without signing it out. Before you go, she leads you to the final exhibit, a bed behind velvet ropes, no placard, no backstory, just pristine white sheets and a folded blanket. We don't know whose it was, she says, but they slept well. We can tell. You stand in silence. Something about the stillness of that bed makes you want to cry, not from sadness, but from recognition, as if you've found proof that it's possible, that real, untroubled rest did exist, even if only briefly, in someone else's life. You step back out onto the street and realize the night is nearly over. The sky above you is still dark, but it's a thinner kind of dark, one that hints at something beneath it. Soon, morning will scrape its way across the rooftops. The city will stir. The bells will return. But not just yet. Not before you find one more place to pause, to let the weight shift again. And maybe, just maybe, lay your burdens down like an old coat at the end of a long hallway. You walk without urgency now, as though time itself has loosened its grip. The city's insomnia feels distant, a ghost pacing someone else's corridor. Your feet lead you to the edge of the Thames, where gaslight flickers across the rippling water like tiny golden insects dancing just out of reach. There, at the river's bend, sits one final structure, plain, unmarked, almost invisible. It leans slightly, as if bowed by the weight of the years. You open the door. Inside is a single room. A fireplace glows with sleepy amber light. Dust dances lazily in the air. In the center of the room, a modest iron-framed bed, turned down as if expecting someone. You hesitate. And then you notice the chair in the corner. A man sits there, ancient, unreadable, wrapped in a greatcoat that could have belonged to any century. He does not look up. He only speaks, softly. You've walked the whole night, he says. You've seen the clocks, the cures, the churches, the chaos. Still awake? You nod. He chuckles. That's all right. Most people are, even when they're asleep. He gestures toward the bed. Don't worry. I'm not here to sell you anything. No tinctures, no prayers. Just a story. One more. One that doesn't ask for anything in return. He leans back and begins. He tells you about a coal merchant in Lambeth who could only fall asleep by reciting every train departure from Paddington Station. About a seamstress who slept standing up between shifts, using a broom handle to prop herself in the alley behind her shop. About a boy who grew up believing dreams were telegrams from the moon and taped stars above his bed to signal he was ready to receive them. He tells you none of them slept well, but all of them believed they would, eventually. A quirky tidbit. In the 1890s, a small London press published The Gentle Almanac, a book containing nothing but 365 pages of invented bedtime facts. One entry read, "There are precisely 47 sheep in heaven. If you count them right, they'll carry you into sleep." Another said, "If you yawn 3 times with your eyes closed, angels take it as a sign to begin the dream." Historians still argue whether these books were meant as satire, sincere medicine, or spiritual placebo. But the elderly man just shrugs. "What's the difference?" he says. "They were trying. That's what matters." You sit down on the bed, not under the covers, just enough to feel the give of the mattress, the subtle creak of springs. There's something intimate about the silence that follows, as if the whole city is holding its breath with you. "You know," the man says, "sometimes sleep doesn't arrive like a boat. It arrives like fog, slowly, all at once, and you don't realize you're inside it until you're already somewhere else." You rest your hands on your knees. Your breathing deepens. Your thoughts no longer come in full paragraphs, just gentle fragments. He looks at you now, eyes kind, but not pitiful. "Maybe you'll sleep tonight. Maybe you won't. But you've earned the rest either way. The world can wait." And then he fades. Not dramatically, not mystically. He's just no longer there. As though he was never entirely separate from the chair, or the night, or you. You lie back. The pillow is cool and soft. The blanket holds weight in just the right way. For a moment, you are aware of everything. Your breath, your heart, the distant river, the faint echo of a bell somewhere far away. And then, nothing. Not darkness, not sleep, just stillness. And it's enough.